My name is Kate Purmal, and I'm here with my co-author Lisa Goldman of our book, The Moonshot Effect.
Hi, good afternoon.
We're here to talk today. We've been talking about these really big problems and possible points of disruption in your industry. And we know these are daunting things, and we're here as an audience. You know, we're waiting for things to shift and change. We're expecting to become the change agents. And we understand this is daunting, and we feel your pain. And so what we're here to do today is to give you a framework and a formula for tackling these big problems that you can walk out the door with and make something happen. So that's our goal, is that we inspire you and give you what you need to step out the door and make an impact. So when we face a big problem, many of us have this reaction like Linus: no problem is so big and complicated that it can't be run away from, right? What we know is that there's a couple reasons this happens. One is because it feels daunting and it feels too big to tackle. And the other is that we're all busy in our work lives, and you're basically mired in the day-to-day business as usual. So who's got time to think about solving big problems? The flip side of this coin is big ideas. And similarly, the cartoon says, all I'm saying is that now is the time to develop the technologies to deflect the asteroid. You know, just like big problems, the flip side of that coin, big ideas, these take a lot of time and focus and initiative. And most of us assume that we're going to be tapped on the shoulder and asked to do that, but that's not how it works. It's sort of like these two dogs. It's always sit, stay, heal, never think, innovate, be yourself. So I'll tell you today, if you're waiting for someone to come and tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, you know what, there's this really big problem we want you to solve, could you just drop everything that you're doing right now and get on that? It's not going to happen. That's not how these get solved. The way big problems get solved, the way moonshots happen, which we'll talk about in a minute, is that somebody has an initiative and an ambition to do something extraordinary, and they simply believe it's their job and their task, and they have to figure out how to make it happen. And collectively, Lisa and I work with hundreds and thousands of executives, you know, hundreds of teams, high-performing teams, and we've collectively worked on more than a dozen moonshots. And what we see is that there's always somebody who simply decides, I'm going to do this. So what is a moonshot? A moonshot is a game-changing initiative that seems almost impossible at the outset, right? Not quite sure how it's going to happen. Technology doesn't exist, the business isn't ready for it, whatever that is. Another factor in a moonshot is that they have some form of extraordinariness to them. They're unusual, they're unexpected. We see this in the zeitgeist. We hear it in President Obama's State of the Union speech. He talked about moonshots 7 times. We know Google has been coining and using this phrase for years. For their highly innovative arms of technology innovation that they're working on. And at the TED conference, we were told that it was mentioned 70-some times. So we're living in a world where moonshots is in the soup that we're all swimming in. We define a moonshot in 3 ways. The first thing is, we've already talked about it, it's a big problem or a big idea. By the way, the moonshots were coined, the term is coined after, many of you probably know, President Kennedy issued a challenge to the nation to send a man to the moon and bring him safely back in 1961. And we actually accomplished that, of course, in 1969 with the first moon landing. And so that it's the Apollo 11 mission is the original origin of that story. That was a big moonshot with a big capital M, obviously. So moonshots are big ideas or big problems that get solved. So they have to be difficult and big. There's another piece of magic that we see in moonshots is that they often have, and the ones we find most successful, have a compressed timeline. So I'm talking about something that sounds something like this: a couple weeks to get to a business, to get to a big idea, maybe 30 to 45 days to get to a business plan, and 6 to 9 months to launch the first iteration of whatever it is you're working on. These compressed schedules are really important to keep the momentum going and keep these things on track. And the final element is they require breakthroughs. Now, when most of us think of breakthroughs, we think of breakthroughs in innovation or technology, product breakthroughs. But moonshots require breakthroughs which are much broader than that. They require breakthroughs in leadership and in management, in business processes. Oftentimes they require new business models that have never been adopted before. They also require breakthroughs in attitude. The people working on these projects need to come to the table with a different attitude and be willing to step outside of what business as usual looks like for them. They also have several things in common in terms of what makes them successful. Whoops, sorry. First of all, what we see successful for Moonshots is a core team of no less than 5 and no more than 7 people who are in the business of solving the kinds of problems that have to be broken through. So they generally involve cross-functional teams. There's also an important need for a visionary leader and an executive sponsor if that leader's not at the top of the company. So somebody who understands how to paint the picture of what they're trying to accomplish, and somebody at the top who can do ground cover and ensure that the initiative gets the fuel supply that it needs. And finally, there's simply dogged execution. I'm sorry, this is the hair trigger remote. Dogged execution. And there is a lot of dogged execution in Moonshots. In fact, our book has 24 practices that we've identified that are critical to success in these rather complicated and difficult projects. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa, who's going to take you through some of our favorite moonshots so you can get a better feel of what they look like in the world.
So I'm checking to make sure my mic is on. Yes, you can hear me back there? Great, thank you. Yeah, you are all looking very alive. I love being up here speaking to you. Thank you. The moonshot I'm going to talk to you about is one that took place in 2007 at Nokia. So why am I telling you about the one that took place then at Nokia? Kate and I collectively have been involved in quite a few moonshots. And by the way, we didn't invent the formula and then teach people how to do it. Our clients did it, and we extracted and codified what they were doing so that it could be replicated elsewhere and done not as a mysterious, woo sort of thing, but something that actually people could follow a formula. So one of our favorites, which is why I am choosing to tell you about the one at Nokia, is the Lee Epting Nokia story. So who is Nokia? Who is Lee Epting? Nokia was, there was a phone up here. You all know what phones look like. Remember the olden days when they were like this, right? Flip phones, or they were really big. So in 2007, Nokia was the largest manufacturer of phones in the world, on the planet. The reason no one knew about them is they weren't innovative. So they come from Helsinki, Finland. That's where the company is based. And they wanted some Silicon Valley magic. So they hired someone named Lee Epting, who worked at Palm Pilot. She was one of the early Silicon Valley magicians, and they brought her in to, work your magic, change us, make us really innovative and great, the Holy Grail. And so she joined, moved to White Plains up in Westchester, this part of the world, and she'd been there about 35 days, and she was presenting what her team was going to do over the next year, and presenting it to the very most senior people in the company. And at the end of the presentation, her boss said to her, well, this is all well and good, like business as usual, but where's the big idea? And she was stunned. Thank you. If anyone just made a little noise over there. That's exactly what was going on inside her head and her body. She left the meeting. I know, I was with her. She made that kind of noise. She didn't sit down. She walked to her office. She realized there was a huge disconnect between the promise that they thought she was bringing and what they saw, which was, she's drinking our Kool-Aid. There's something wrong here. So she didn't sit down at her desk. She picked up her phone, and she thought to herself, who are the most innovative, creative, stable, best spreadsheet jockey, best executor, most wild-ass thinker, in every category she could think, and she came up with 6 people. She called them all and said, run to my office immediately. And they did, running down the hall. And she said to them, I have a challenge for you. I want you to drop everything and come up with a big idea that's going to add 10 million users to our user base within 9 months. And I want you to come up with this idea. You got 30 days. They'd never heard anything like this before. This was like an outrageous, like going to the moon for them. And she said, you're noticing that you're standing over there and I'm standing over here. I am not part of your team. I am now your executive sponsor. Here's what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to get rid of all your roadblocks. I'm going to champion what you come up with in the most senior levels. And I have just cleared your calendars. There's nothing else on your plate but my call to action. They hopped on a plane in the middle of January, went to Helsinki. It was snowy. They went to a Boy Scout camp. That's a whole story with the sauna, the vodka, right? And they came back with, as she asked, 3 ideas and a recommendation. And she championed the one recommendation. She fought for everything that needed to be fought for. And I'm going to fast forward for you what happened. 7 months later, I picked up Inc. magazine in Northern California, which is where we both happen to live. And it said 25 most innovative companies. And I thought, oh, I wonder who's this year's winners. And Nokia was one of them for the Mosh product that they came up with. Totally outside their realm of thinking. I called Lee, and she said she had had no idea that was going to happen. We talked to Lee about, 7 or 8 months ago and asked her to retell this whole story to us. And she told the story pretty much as I told it, but she added something. She said, here's what I really remember. And her voice started to crack. And she said, this was not just an ordinary thing. At the celebration meeting, where we were delivering the product and having a completion meeting for this, people were moved to tears that we could accomplish this. And the 5-6 people that I called up on the phone have since gone to other very large companies and launched their own moonshots. They've created heroes in their wake. And by the time she finished telling us that part of the story, which was the effect of the moonshot, she was in tears. And this was, 16 minus 7, 8 years later. So that's really why moonshots are special. And I hear our call to action at the 3% conference is, that's why this is a moonshot. That's why it's worth our passions and our attention.
So now we're going to get you guys involved.
Yes.
And if you're not sitting next to somebody, please do. Could you please advance that for me? Thank you. Okay. So everybody has something, I can see, everybody has something to write with and on, and if you don't, you can write in your head, but most of you have something to write on and with. So we would like you to write down for yourself now with no other information, this is just wild ass thinking, the answer to this question. What's the biggest kind of one level above you problem facing your company, division, department? Or industry if you want to get really big.
If you want to get really big. What's the one biggest problem that bugs you, challenges you, inspires you, is chronic, however you'd like to think about it? What's that one biggest problem? So I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to write that down. The second question is, how will you know when you solved it? If that thing were to be solved and you no longer had it as a problem, how would you know that?
What would you see happening in the business, in your immediate surroundings? How would people behave differently?
What would they say? What would client companies say about you? What would you be able to say to attract stellar talent to your agency? What would people who call on potential new clients be able to say about your agency that they can't say now? What things would exist? So I'm going to give you a minute and a half to sketch out the problem and what a solution would look like, how you know.
Compressed time frame.
Yep. Ready, set. Compressed timeline, artificial buzzer. If I had that Jeopardy buzzer, I'd say, time's up. So now what we'd like you to do is turn to the person next to you. For you guys, it would be you 3, you 2, you know, you can figure it out. Find somebody near you, and I'm going to give you 30 seconds each. Share what you just wrote down and why you think it's important. We'll give you a minute, 30 seconds each. That's great. Okay, so first of all, thank you for your enthusiastic participation. This is the second part of the participation. All of you heard something that I think was probably pretty interesting from your colleagues. Would somebody care to share something they heard from somebody else that they thought was particularly, wow, that's great, that's unusual, they liked, they were sparked, and share it with us? What can we steal that you heard?
Share a good idea that somebody else that you were working with had. Or a
You got a nanosecond.
Come on, send it here. Perfect, thank you.
This is cross-industry. I have a lefty to my left and a lefty to my right, and they just made a pen discovery, or shared a pen discovery. There's a pen that's made for lefties, so they're not getting ink all over their hands?
Yes.
Mind blown.
Excellent, yay, that's great. Excellent. Who else?
Who else?
Heard something.
Come on, anybody.
I'm going to
Great
troll
idea,
amongst
great
you.
problem. We're gonna have to.
What did you
We're
hear?
gonna get out of my. Oh, there's one.
Yep.
Carly in front of us just said that she's working for a company that's about 4 or 5 years old, and one of the things that they're struggling with is finding a mission that everybody can get behind, that they can articulate to everybody.
That's so common, and so I'm glad you noticed that and said it that way for other people to hear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who else heard something? Because you know I'm not above putting a mic in somebody's hand.
My company's struggling to maintain our culture a bit, and my partner said we need C-level people to really embody the culture.
That's great. That's good. Thank you, and thank you for noticing it and saying it. Okay, so so one of the things we saw this morning was people working on the fly in front of the room. We just made an executive on the fly decision. So.
Okay, so we're going to move on. We have some more questions to do, and I'm just going to read these quickly so you can think about them separately. What are the 3 to 5 breakthroughs that would be required to solve the problem? And who are the 5 to 7 people who could solve those breakthroughs, those problems, or who could achieve the breakthroughs that are required to solve the problem? So that's one way to think about how to assemble a team to do this sort of thing. Now we talked about one of the critical components of a moonshot. One of the critical components of a moonshot success is having visionary leadership. And there was a study recently done about women leaders, and it turns out that vision is the one trait out of 10 that women score less than men. On all other traits, 7 out of 10, they score higher than men. On 2 out of 10, they score evenly, and vision is the one trait that they score lower. Now, I consider this a huge opportunity, because if we can elevate our vision scores, you know, it might be that last mile thing, right? So, how do you cultivate vision? Well, I studied as a result of this visionaries for several years, and there's very little research on visionaries. And what we found is something that's surprising, it's unexpected. We thought that vision was innate. It was something you were either born with or not, and I think probably most of us in this room have that sense. But it's not true. Vision is actually something that can be learned, and it can be taught, and it can be cultivated. And what I mean by vision is sensing opportunities and threats in the environment, inspiring constituencies, those traits that you associate with future-thinking visionary leaders who you identify. And almost all workplaces have maybe one or two of them that are really visible. So what I want to do now is I want to show you how this works. And I'd love to have somebody from the audience who has a big idea that they're working on. I will guarantee you, if you do this exercise with me, it will catapult you ahead by months in your success. So who is willing to come up front? It'll be easy, I promise you. And you'll just answer some questions. Anybody have a big idea that they're working on? Anything. Could be a little moonshot with a little M, a big M.
All right, in the back.
Oh, there we go. Come on up. Thank you. Come on up. Yeah. All right. So while she's on her way up, I had the pleasure and honor of working with Jeff Hawkins, who invented the Palm Pilot, which was the precursor to the iPhone. I'm going to have you go stand by Lisa for a moment. And and before he invented this, when it was still an idea in his head, and one day he was at home, and he carved a balsa wood model of this concept that he had, and he brought it into the office the following Monday. And he said, this is what we're going to build. And it was complete with a little chopstick that he whittled down to look like a stylus, right? And here's what he did. He went around for the next 9 months until we had a working prototype, carrying it in his pocket and using it as if it worked. And I got to tell you, we walk into meetings and I go, what if it doesn't work? It's okay, because really, he'd be taking notes on it in meetings, right? And what was really funny is in about 2 weeks, we all thought it worked too. So we go, hey, can I borrow that for a second? I want to check something out about this user experience. Seriously, it was as if the thing worked, right? How many clicks? We figured out no more than 2 clicks. It was magical. So what he had done is what most visionaries do, is he had stepped into the future and lived in the future where this product already existed and happened to fit in his pocket and had a stylus, and he brought us all along with him to have us all embody and experience that. And that's the key thing about visionaries that sets them apart from the rest of us. They actually step into the future and experience the future as if it's already happened, and that's what pulls them to make things happen and take risks, because they think it's already possible. So that's what we're going to do now. This is Karen.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Karen. Come on
I'm a
up.
little nervous.
That's okay. So while we're here, just tell me a little bit about you can stand on this side here, because we're going to be moving in that direction in a minute. Tell me a little bit about your big idea,
So my big idea is how to bring purpose to a culture and to leadership, infuse it into our culture, bring it into our performance reviews, and how to have it be something that's articulated as a value in our agency.
Okay, great. So how to bring purpose into your agency and really have it articulated as a value.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So what I want you to do is stand here. This is, come right up here. I'm sorry, it's a little confusing.
Okay.
And that's the future, but you're going to stand right here for a minute.
Okay.
So this is today, and stay there. And somewhere out here, you can choose, pick a spot, is when that's already happened. Okay? Not yet. It's going to take some time.
Okay.
And this is the time in between, yeah?
Okay.
Okay. So tell me, you're in your mission to bring purpose into your culture, into your agency, and have that be a really vital and core part of it. What does it feel like now, sitting on this side of it, trying to get there? What's your experience of that?
How does it feel now? It feels exciting because there's a lot of receptivity to it. It feels hard to articulate because it's not exactly the easiest KPI to define, right? So it's not super measurable because it's an intangible thing and it's personal for everyone. And it feels scary because it's new. It's a new concept. It's not an accomplishment. It's not about what did I accomplish this year and I can check it off my box. It's really much more about a personal journey and how someone grows within the agency and how someone grows within a year of time, personally and professionally.
Got it.
And what drives them.
So exciting. Does this sound familiar when you're about to embark on something exciting, full of possibilities, scary? Yeah? Yeah, and when that scary part shows up, give me a little more flavor around that. It's scary, but what else is it in that thing?
It's scary. Is the name scary?
Yeah, scary.
It's scary because it's, I don't know how to say it. I mean, it sounds, sitting in a room of executives and business people, it sounds like hokum. And they're all kind of like, what the hell does that mean? What is purpose? So the beginning of the conversation is working with the leadership team to identify what our purpose is, what our vision is, so there is an experience of that.
Got it. Okay, great. we are. This is the present. You get a sense of how Karen is experiencing this, right? Okay, so we're gonna step out in a place on the carpet where it's already happened. And it's happening, and it's rolling,
Okay.
and it is rocking, and it's there.
So good.
Okay, all right. Notice the change in physiology. We're here. Okay, what do you notice here? So keep standing forward.
Okay,
going forward.
okay.
That's the future, that's the past.
Yeah,
What do you notice here?
I'm smiling.
You're smiling.
And
Yeah,
I'm laughing.
yeah.
I'm smiling and I'm laughing. You know, and it feels fulfilling.
Fulfilling.
Not just like I accomplished something, but I made a difference.
Excellent. You made a difference. And I just got a chill, sorry. Tell me about what the experience is in the business, in the agency. What's going on in the agency that used to not happen back there?
There is commonality of language. There's commonality of that we're all working as a body towards one thing, as well as expressing gifts, talents, abilities, all the natural things that make people gifted at what they are.
Excellent. And what about that hokum thing back there?
It's gone.
It's going. Hokum thing. Okay, can you do me a favor? Stay
Yeah.
in this spot, but turn
Yeah.
around. And look back on the journey.
Nice back there.
Look back at the journey, though. Look what's happened, what you've
Okay.
accomplished. What was the most important thing that you did leaving this room today, back there, that made this possible?
Just taking a step.
Taking a step.
Yeah.
And what was the hardest part along the journey that you had to overcome to get here?
Taking a step.
Taking a step.
And having courage to take the step and do it.
Okay, and how does it feel here now that you've experienced
Really
that?
good.
And does that feel more doable than?
Yeah.
Okay,
Really
thank
good.
you. Thank you, Karen. Thank you. Thank you. So what you've experienced with Karen is what visionaries do. They step into the future, they have that rich experience, they're excited, they're really fulfilled by it, and then they can't go back to the present because if you remember only one thing, would you please flip to the next slide? And you only write down one thing. It's that you should know that visionaries are impatient. And you need to know that you don't get what you deserve. Next slide, please. You get what you tolerate. And visionaries fail to tolerate the present condition once they've gone into the future. And that's what makes them tick. Okay, next slide. I want to close by sharing with you our next moonshot, and in hopes that it will inspire you with some of the things that we're working on to help solve the big problems that you're looking to solve in your industry. We are tired of having less than 5% of female executives in the largest companies in the world. And in fact, this last year it went down to 4.something%, and only one new female executive was added to the Fortune 500. It is completely unacceptable, and we're done with that. So, what we also know in doing the research is that one of the big problems that leads to that is that the pipeline of women who are the next level down and the next level down isn't big enough to be able to fuel the C-suite. So, and the way it happens today is that for men, there's an informal network that grooms men, gives them board opportunities, advancement opportunities, and it doesn't happen with women and underrepresented minorities in the senior executive ranks. So we're going to forget about that informal network, and we're going to create a formal network, and we're going to tap talented women on the shoulder and say, you can do this, come join us, get on the bandwagon, and we'll take you through the process. And Lisa and I have coached hundreds of C-level executives and made many of them moving up the ranks into the C-suite in working with us. So there's 5 pillars, next please, to get there. And this is just what it takes to get on the path. The first thing is running a business unit or getting profit and loss responsibility. And I'm going to give you a story in telling you this of Helen, who's a client of mine. She runs half of the revenue through a company that's worth half a $500 million in revenue. She has a VP title. She doesn't have a senior vice president title. She doesn't have an EVP title. It's a VP title. And so one of the things, she's already doing this, but she's not being recognized for it. So she just went to her management, asked for an S or an E in front of her name, and she got it. And it's just because she hadn't asked. Next slide, please.
Was she wearing red lipstick?
The other thing is corporate board service. All CEOs in this largest companies have served on corporate boards in other companies, smaller companies. Before getting there, they understand the process of governance. Absolutely necessary step. The third thing is Cross-functional experience. What we know from the research, LinkedIn did a study, working in 3 or 4 cross-functional departments is the equivalent of getting an MBA. So it's critical experience, and it's absolutely critical for anybody moving to the C-suite. Next slide, please. Industry or thought leadership. Being recognized and visible outside of your company is absolutely critical to being pulled into the highest spots internally to your company. And this doesn't happen automatically. You got to make it happen. And the 5th thing is cultivating vision, because as I mentioned, it is the one trait that people expect most in a leader. 78% of people want their C-level leader to be visionary, and only 28% think their manager needs to be visionary. So really, it is the one distinguishing trait between leaders and managers. So we're launching a program next year. We're running a pilot program starting in January with 8 senior executives, and we're launching a full program towards the middle of the year. What we're asking from you is to be inspired by, the simple, practical blocking and tackling way to move things forward. That's our approach. And also to ask you if you or anybody you know is the kind of leader that you want to see in the C-suite that's already risen to a certain level and they're ready to make that next move. Come to us, let us know, give us your card, because we're recruiting people for this program, and we want to include the people that you see as the ones that you want to lead companies in the next generation. All right, so finally we're going to close with a quote here. People in organizations are hungry for leaders who challenge them to do meaningful and inspiring work. This is one of the most critical things you can contribute, and we're asking you to leave today to create opportunities, moonshots, big idea projects that inspire people and give them that opportunity. And we know you can all do it. It's within all of you. Nobody's going to tap you on the shoulder. So let's just step up and do it and make it happen.
Earlier you heard people talking about micro actions, and we referred to small changes that you can make. So I'm going to challenge you. Hello, I'm going to challenge you all in this room to take one micro action within the next week. Choose someone that you work with at your agency or at a client company and make them a hero within 1 week. That's a micro action. Thank you.